Welcome to Live with Marketers, our award-winning LinkedIn Live broadcast series exploring industry trends and future-forward views of the marketing landscape with some of the brightest minds in the B2B arena. I'm your host, Alex Durin, Senior Content Marketing Manager at LinkedIn, and that rhymed. And I'm excited to be broadcasting to you today from Portland as part of our special at-home series. In today's episode, we'll explore what marketers should be measuring now. Now, it's likely that many of your goals and KPIs that your organization may have set earlier in the year have been reshaped due to COVID-19. And many business leaders are being challenged to adapt on the fly and draw up new roadmaps. While many of us are navigating this path to recovery, healthy growth may look different than it did before, and that's completely okay. To take a closer look at the evolution of measurement, we're excited to welcome Mike Menkes, Senior Vice President of Analytic Partners, T. Svetkov, or just T as he prefers to go by, who is a Senior Vice President at Nielsen, and Carl Sjogren, who is Senior Product Marketing Manager, focusing on measurement specifically here at LinkedIn. So we've got a packed agenda today, including what LinkedIn is seeing in the economic downturn across industries, how to plan for a strong recovery with scenario planning, how measurement strategies should change given consumer behavior, and predictions about the future of marketing measurement. We'll also leave about 10 minutes at the end for live Q&A, so please submit any questions you may have within the comments as we go along. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to our guests. Thank you so much for being here today. And as is tradition at LinkedIn, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, and share something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. And since this is a special at-home edition, let the audience know where you're broadcasting from. So Mike, I will leave it to you first.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me. My name is Mike Menkes. I am a Senior Vice President with Analytic Partners. I've been in the marketing analytics space for 20 years now, the bulk of that time with Analytic Partners. And for those of you in the marketing space, probably familiar with Analytic Partners. For those who are not, we are an independent global leader in analytics consulting technology. We really help brands grow. And so my role within Analytic Partners is to help the client engagement team and work with clients to understand what drives the business, identify opportunities. And let's see. Something that's not on my LinkedIn profile. I had a number of different types of diverse jobs when I was younger in high school and college. One notable one was I ran my own DJ business for a few years with a couple of my good friends. More recently, I volunteer with a lot of different youth organizational sports. And really focusing on coaching and organizing those sports. I am the president of New Rochelle Lightning Hockey. And also Rocket, New York.
Amazing. Well, thanks for being here today. And if this whole tech marketing thing doesn't work out, there's a large DJ house music space there waiting for you. All right, T, over to you.
Hello, my name is Tsvetan Svetkov. I go by T for obvious reasons. I've been, like Mike, I've been in the marketing effectiveness and marketing analytics space for the past 20 plus years, started in CRM, but have been doing exclusively marketing ROI and marketing effectiveness work for the past 17 of them, of which about 10 years with Nielsen. I think most folks know Nielsen, obviously famous for Nielsen ratings, but really our focus as a company is across measurement of marketing and media across the entire media ecosystem. One area, something that's not on my LinkedIn profile is probably more of a hobby, but one thing I missed this year because of COVID is being able to travel around the world and watch Formula One racing. So can't wait to be able to do that again in 2021. And it's great to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. And I completely agree. I have the travel bug big time. Carl, you're up next.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Sjogren. That's for show as in yes and grin as in smile. And I'm a product marketing manager here at LinkedIn, focused on measurement. So the tools that LinkedIn launches natively to support measurement, as well as all our third-party partnerships like Nielsen and Analytic Partners. And I'm excited to talk to you today about measurement. When I think about what's not on my LinkedIn, my first job was at Baskin-Robbins, where I started as an ice cream scooper, but was promoted to a cake decorator. And so whenever a new Disney movie comes out or a new cartoon, in addition to what is going to be the good song and what are we going to cheer for, I often think of what are the cakes going to look like at birthday parties this year. And it just keeps going with me. And I'm joining us from San Diego, but I'm normally in San Francisco, but I escaped the fires just in time.
Yes, everyone's escaping. It's pretty smoky here in Portland today, but it's kind of moving out. So grateful for that. Okay, so let's kick off the discussion with how measurement has changed over the past 6 months or so. And according to LinkedIn, our own recent research, we found that a large majority of marketers are measuring ROI, but only 63% of marketers, don't feel very confident in their ROI measurements. So why do you think this might be? And I'll hand the question to T.
Yeah, I think a lot of, when we talk about ROI, I think a lot of marketers and advertisers out there really look at it as the holy grail, and as such, it has to be really well backed up with kind of the right set of analytics and the right approach. So I think in a lot of cases, the approach may look as a black box to some of the advertisers. I would say COVID has not helped the case necessarily. Again, understanding the impact of COVID and other external factors in the ecosystem, the marketing ecosystem, is something that a lot of people in Mike and my field have kind of scrambled to get ways to really measure the impact and making sure that the ROI estimates are accurate and precise in this current.
Yeah, Mike, do you have anything to add to that? I know that you've done a lot of research around this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is also just the complexity of the world today, and recognizing that measurement is complicated, and that it does require comprehensive measurement to measure a lot of the direct effects that are easy to measure, as well as the indirect effects that are a little more difficult to measure. So that's become more centrally raised in the industry, which is nice to see because it is a core element for accurate measurement.
Yeah, I think brands are definitely feeling the pressure to prove ROI now more than ever. So let's talk about how teams have adapted and just adapted to the situation we found ourselves in. Have benchmarks changed? Carl, I'll hand that one to you first.
Great, yeah. So what we've been using here at LinkedIn is a framework that we call the 3 Fs: fight, flight, fight or flight, face or freeze, and that sort of tells us what position you're in and how you view the future of your business. And I think back 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, to the first Great Recession, and I had just exited grad school and I was in consulting at Deloitte. And I remember that when everything started to crash, when Lehman crashed, one of the senior partners told us all that as long as there was still donuts and bagels on Fridays, there was nothing to worry about. And that kind of calmed the office. It was a quiet office. Everyone was IMing each other a lot. And then sort of 3 weeks later, they stopped serving donuts and bagels on Fridays, and then everyone really freaked out. And so I would say the office was in fight or flight mode. And we have a question for the group and for the audience of, where do you find yourself? Are you in fight and flight mode where you're just kind of kicking around, messaging your coworkers, trying to figure out what's going on? Are you in freeze mode, where you're looking to just pause spend and evaluate? Or are you in face mode where you're like, there is an opportunity. Let me increase budgets. Let me focus my spend in more areas so I can grow the business. or are you sort of just fighting to survive? If you can just weigh in on where you are, I'm very interested to see where this group finds itself, because at the start of this, seeing the numbers that we have internally at LinkedIn, we kind of saw the coronavirus spread through APAC very early on in the numbers in January, February, and March. There was like a substantial pullback, and then when everything started to move to the U.S., there was an equal sense of fear, concern, uncertainty, and almost all of our advertisers found themselves in flight or fear. But as the pandemic has continued, we see a lot more advertisers, almost 80 to 90% of them are in the face mode, where they're recognizing this is a new normal, and this is, numbers still need to be met, businesses still need to grow, and it's about having new strategies and new ways of measuring and driving performance and speaking to customers, and not necessarily pulling back. And I'm curious to hear where the group's at.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of people. I think it's a tie. I think it's a tie between freeze and face. Those numbers are blurry, fuzzy math, but I think I've seen a lot of fight, a lot of face, which makes sense, right, Carl? I mean, it's totally. I think that most marketers are getting ready to recover and rebuild, but I think there's a huge disparity across verticals and industries. So it could be a plethora of different responses that are there. So regardless of the different modes that marketers may find themselves in, success benchmarks have changed. So, Mike, have you seen many companies revisiting what success looks like now?
Absolutely. Companies definitely can and should be rethinking their KPIs and what success looks like. To what you just spoke about, there are a variety of different types of businesses that are in very different situations going on with this pandemic. Some businesses, the demand has increased substantially during this time period. Others, quite the opposite, decreased demand. And for some, the game has just changed in general. Some businesses and organizations, their sales may be up, but their trips are down. So that dynamic has changed, and basket sizes have changed in retail. And it's important that organizations align their goals together. So it's important to rethink what the KPIs are and reassess and rebalance, and making sure that the organization is working towards common goals.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more, but focusing on measuring not just for the short term, but for the long term as well. I know that, a lot of people are in that panic mode, but measuring long term will obviously have it's more growth opportunity for companies. So, but thanks for that, Mike. And speaking of changes, since a large portion of marketers are working from home, myself included, and it looks like everyone else included on the call, has this had any effect on content consumption practices?
Yeah, I would say Nielsen's bread and butter is indeed measuring media consumption, and there's definitely been a pretty large shift in terms of how consumers and audiences consume media, as well as products, as Mike referred to. With working from home, there is obviously plenty of time to consume different and alternative types of media. The other trend that we see is just over half of workers who have switched to working from home. In their from home schedule, we see them actually getting up later, hitting the sheets later at night as well. And there is additional media consumption that happens at home, whether it's streaming or other services. So that's something that marketers should definitely take note of. Again, additional time and additional media consumption means more opportunities to really dialogue with your customers. So one thing we're seeing is between the various kind of age groups out there, we see a significant increase in streaming service, and I'll talk more about it. But I think it's in the grand scheme of things, there is a lot more opportunity and a lot more chances for you to actually activate against your consumers.
Okay, interesting. So we all know that marketers are experiencing budget cuts across the board. And some marketers may be thinking, okay, now's the time to reduce ad spend and potentially go quiet for a while. So T, is that a good idea, and why or why not?
Yeah, when Carl talks about freezing or facing, I think the word freeze often means freezing budgets, right, in this particular environment. So we have seen, obviously, the initial reaction in a lot of advertisers has been to kind of stop and take a look at everything they do, to be able to really manage their business tighter and better over this period of time. However, I think the dangers that come with reducing or eliminating your marketing budgets are vast. They're not just impact on your sales in the immediate future, that's in the next week or quarter, but we're really talking about over a longer period of time. So as is shown on the slide we're going to share, our database of long-term effects that we have at Nielsen allows us to kind of look at what are typical benchmarks of getting away or going dark on advertising for a longer period of time. So one example that I wanted to share is cutting advertising in, for example, the second half of 2020 can lead to 11% decline in 2021. Even if you pick it up again on January 1st, 2021, you have already eroded your base, you have already impacted your brand equity, and that does have detrimental effects on your sales. The other element here, which is shown on this slide, is the importance of customer acquisition and customer retention. We all know that gaining a customer is something that is very difficult to do. And we put out annually our CMO report, which looks at how CMOs and interviews and service CMOs in terms of how they look at their business. And over half of the CMOs declared customer acquisition and retention as their #1 priority. This is the time to acquire and retain your customers. This is a time when the effectiveness of your media in acquiring and retaining your customers should be a top priority, not just for half of the CMOs, but for everybody out there. One thing we also see is that being more precise and leveraging purchase-based targeting in acquiring and retaining your consumers has a significant impact of your overall marketing performance. So the 2x impact that we see is pretty consistent, where if you're much more targeted and are using new techniques versus just broad reach, allows you to double your ROI.
Those are amazing data points to have. Mike, I know that Analytic Partners also did research in regards to this point. So would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we looked into this. This was a key question for many of our clients at the beginning of the pandemic was, what should we do? Should we continue to advertise or not? There was a lot of skepticism around whether to invest. And so what we saw when we looked into the ROI genome, which I'll explain what that is in a few minutes, but we saw that the majority of businesses actually saw ROI improvements during prior recessions. And obviously this is a little different than prior years, but it is important to note that during economic downturns in the past, we have seen, and other research confirms this as well, that most brands actually increase their ROI during this time period. And that's true for even brands that increase investment. And I think it's important to note that lasting effect, it's immediate during the recession itself, but also lasts beyond the recession. So Harvard Business Review and the Journal of Advertising Research did some similar research that pointed to the same thing, which is that it is important to continue to invest during recessions. That's going to vary from business to business, but the average business absolutely should. And there are sizable trade-offs by not doing so. And conversely, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's all you.
I was going to say, conversely, we also looked at the opposite side. So brands that actually reduced media investment, and that really just guarantees losses. So brands that pulled back on advertising struggled through the recession, and more importantly, struggled to regain market share afterwards. So it's really, really important. And T mentioned this as well, but we quantified something similar, which is if the average brand cut back on advertising, by $50 million in 2020, that's really, the trade-off there is they're losing over $300 million in revenue and sales, both in the short and the long term, with those decisions. So it does have big implications, and certainly not something we would advise for most businesses.
Great. Yeah, and I think just like also from a general customer relationship standpoint. Like, it doesn't really bode well for your company to go completely dark when there's so much going on in the world. Like, it's more helpful to, take the opportunity to share your company's mission and values, I would say.
Exactly.
I also just wanted to mention quickly that the comments section is available for questions. So please feel free to continue to put your questions in there, and we'll get to them at the end. And unfortunately, I don't think we're qualified to share when COVID will be ending, so we will be addressing that one at the end. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I want to give it over to Carl. So Carl recently published an ebook on LinkedIn on planning for a strong recovery, filled with best practices on driving growth and ROI. And in it, Carl, you outline 6 steps, a 6-step plan for recovery. Can you walk us through those 6 steps, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Let's talk about sort of the genesis of this workbook. We have the fight or flight, face or freeze framework that we rolled out internally earlier this year. And as everyone sort of started to settle into here's the phase that I'm in, often marketers would ask us, like, LinkedIn, like, what would you do? Like, what should we be doing? Because LinkedIn has a very diversified view of most of our customers' businesses. We have our talent media business. So we saw the pullback in hiring and job postings. We have a sales productivity business. So we saw how pipeline was rapidly changing, coverages was changing. Deals were being lost. Like, there was a sort of a market insight into the lack of performance. And then we also have our marketing and our learning businesses. So let's just talk about how, and our core consumer products. Let's just talk about how those are changing and what led to this plan for recovery. Is sessions are up 50 to 70%, depending on the market. People are posting more. They're logging in more. They're talking to their network more. They're signing in to watch learning and trainings more than ever. Corporates are leaning into LinkedIn Learning because you can no longer offer training live, and then individuals are taking more sessions because they're trying to up-level their skills and stay relevant in this job environment. And so there's been a real sort of transformation, and we call it the digital transformation of the last 6 months has probably been like 10 years worth of productivity enhancements, changes, and developments on your side. And so we really had to ask ourselves, like, what do we want to share with marketers for how do you plan for this new normal? Because our chief economist here at LinkedIn said this is different from the previous Great Recession, where it was largely a balance sheet recession. So it takes a while for both companies as well as individuals to kind of recover from having unhealthy balance sheets. Deleveraging takes time. This is an external shock factor that put us all into fear mode, but it will have a long-term impact on capacity and the ability for our economy to produce. So the example that she likes to use is a dentist office, right? Your dentist office either has or will shortly or will probably open, but he or she isn't going to see as many customers. Instead of seeing 100 clients in a week, they'll see 25. Instead of seeing 5 people in an hour, they'll see 1. And that ripples down because that person he or she can now hire less people for her office. There's less money that goes around. So how do you plan in that environment, knowing that this isn't going to be a quick V-shaped recovery as everything goes back to normal? We're seeing it's going to take some time. So we have these 6 steps that really provide guidance on what you should do, knowing your particular market or your role within the organization. And the first one is just knowing your role. So we worked with some leading industry thought research bodies, McKinsey, Analytic Partners, Nielsen, Bain, to really look at the sections of what is a marketer supposed to do and how are you supposed to influence your organization, from brand management, strategic planning, customer experience, and customer acquisition. What's your role and what are the best practices and trends within your industry? And what does success look like from what we've learned from previous recessions on how the world-class, best-in-class organizations use a crisis to sort of not tighten the hatches, but get the ship in order so you can steer through the other side more effectively. And that goes into just sort of step 2 is taking a current state assessment. We don't live in a world where there's no data. There's actually lots of data, whether it's your Google Analytics trends, your content insights from LinkedIn, media consumption habits from a partner like Nielsen, looking at where are your customers, like how is the state of your industry doing, the state of your particular customers, and where are they consuming media, getting that sense before you just jump into freeze mode of what's happening and where is my market moving, is sort of the first step. And then take stock of all of those different data points and chart a strategy. You might see a shift, you're going to have customers come to your store less, but they're maybe buying more and it's going to be online. There's some type of actual growth lever that's taking place. And it's really important to use that CRM data, use that market research, use your Google Trends data to provide a quantitative data-driven view of how you lean through this recovery, because it is going to be a slower recovery because of the reduced demand of especially for sectors that are more impacted by in-office visits. It's going to be a slower uptake than if you were in sort of business services or online tech SaaS products, where we're seeing actually quite significant growth during this period of time. And so that leads to step 4, which is just start with optimizing your measurement strategy with LinkedIn. Do you have all of the right tools and partnerships that we've brought on board in place to drive effective performance on the platform? We're bringing in all these new partners to allow you to see how to measure LinkedIn, how to use LinkedIn within your media mix, and making sure you have your best practices and the sort of table stakes on what performance looks like on LinkedIn activated. So that's step 5. We've shared a best practices guide of things that you can do to optimize campaign performance, whether it's enabling certain products, the window in which you measure attribution or do sort of creative or targeting refreshes, making sure you're adhering to sort of what is the best practice will get you the highest performance out of the platform. And then finally, just step 6, aligning on goals. So your account team or yourself, you can really make sure that it's not just how do we survive this week, but what does the next couple quarters look like in terms of how I want to plan my product rollouts, where am I forecasting sales and growth opportunities, and how am I making sure that my marketing team that is delivering on the day-to-day performance of how I'm trafficking, planning, and setting up campaigns, that they have all you have your site tags are properly implemented and you're tracking individual user flows. You have a point of view on how much should be balanced between customer acquisition and brand spending, instead of just kind of leaving it to the day-to-day or week-to-week optimizations, being thoughtful in how you're going to use this time and holding yourself accountable. And we have a number of self-serve tools, as well as tools that your account teams have access to help you elevate your performance and implementation on the platform for more targeted content to more effective and high impact creative. If you want to learn more about it, we're going to be following up after this with the guide for download. And there's also a link at the bottom of the screen where you can download it in more detail.
Great. And if you missed, there it is. There's the link. So that's the short link if you want to go download the ebook in full. And I will mention it again later on in case you didn't get a chance to write it down. We are flying through our content, so I'm going to keep it moving. Let's talk about marketers, helping marketers not only recover and rebuild, but plan for the future. So within your strategy, regardless of what the circumstances are, should be this idea of scenario planning. Analytic Partners most recently released an ROI Genome Intelligence report that shares the insights to accelerate growth within scenario planning. So Mike, I'd like for you to share more about what scenario planning is and why it's helpful. But first, I have to ask, for everyone wondering, what is an ROI genome?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So the ROI Genome is essentially our collective intelligence working with clients over the past 20 years. So it is essentially what we've learned in measuring hundreds of billions in marketing spend. We've done work in over 55 countries across the globe. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 700, 800 brands measured. A diverse collection of information. It's not just about ROIs, but really understanding how marketing and non-marketing factors impact business performance. And so the ROI Genome is essentially, our vision is to create wisdom from accumulated numbers and knowledge. And we're able to do that by identifying not only ROI benchmarks, but also what drives marketing performance, understanding things like synergies and understanding things like halo and understanding things like contextual relevance. How do those all play a part in marketing performance and business growth? So that's essentially what the ROI genome is. And every once in a while, every quarter or so, we launch an intelligence report that focuses on various topics. And as you mentioned, the last one was about scenario planning for growth. And one of the big highlights coming out of that report at a high level was we looked into the ROI genome and we found that companies that adapt and adopt business planning and scenario planning to help drive growth are actually have 5 times the growth of those that don't. So businesses that are leaning into understanding what's driving their growth and what's driving their business and running simulations and scenarios about possible future states are driving 5 times the growth of those that aren't, which is pretty valuable, pretty sizable.
Yeah, that is amazing. So what are the key principles of scenario planning, or do you have some kind of scenario planning framework that everyone can implement?
Yeah, so the report went into a lot more detail, but at a high level, we established a few principles and a framework. So the key principles that were pretty consistent were that it needs to be data-driven. So we need to have factual information around what drives our business. We don't need to have all the answers, but we do know within reason what's worked in the past, what possible futures might exist, and that allows us to help plan for the future. It also needs to be collaborative, so integrating and working across different multifunctional departments to make sure we're not double counting things and evolving. So those are the principles, but the measurement framework that we've talked about was really centered around 3 key areas. So one was establishing what measurements of success we want to focus on. So this can be either one KPI or best situations are when there's multiple KPIs factored in. So it can be things like sales, it can be visits, it can be new customer acquisition, it can be a variety of other things, long-term brand equity. So really understanding what are those KPIs we want to strive for and how do we balance the priorities there. The second part of the framework is around performance drivers. So being able to understand definitively what's driving the business. And so that includes controllable and non-controllable factors. And that can be really important for many businesses. A lot of times organizations are focused on just the controllable drivers, but it's important to recognize that there are a lot of things out of our hands. And rather than dismiss them, we need to integrate that into the measurement framework and embrace that to be able to understand how we're able to drive growth for the future. And then that last point is really around key considerations. So, every business is unique. It was really hard to come up with a framework that works for any given business, but this really has to do with basically those nuances across different businesses. So things like route to market. Are we an online or an offline business? What are the ways that we can reach consumers? Is it a product or a service? Is those sorts of dynamics to be able to refine the scenario planning. So, we went into things, especially with the controllable factors. We went into a lot of different areas around what drives marketing success. And then also thinking about things like, it's not just about, key drivers such as spend and ROI, but also dynamics such as contextual relevance, how relevant an impression is or a brand experience is for different people at different times, different scenarios, different messages. And then the direct and indirect effects, which can be, an advertising or connection with a consumer or customer. What is the impact that it has now and later? What are the indirect effects? Things like TV advertising or other alternatives oftentimes drive search behavior. So how online and offline work together, and then also quantifying the value of those different touch points. And so one of the things I know, Alex, you'd mentioned before, it was interesting to hear that, for example, an online video impression is worth about 3 times that of a digital display impression. So being able to understand those dynamics and make the best decisions possible for the future is really what's going to set many organizations up for success.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. And yeah, that was really interesting to me. I just think we're just going to see video reign supreme. I mean, we've been saying it for years, but I think it will continue to be. So but it sounds like we're saying that there is a higher value for certain impressions. So I wanted to ask Carl, how are some impressions, quote unquote, worth more than others?
Yeah, so this is actually why we're bringing on all these new measurement partners and capabilities, is to help you understand, did LinkedIn work, or did any other platform work, but how do we compare relative to others? And from the brand outcomes bucket, so how well did an ad or commercial or visual resonate with a user? We're seeing great performance on LinkedIn. So from a brand these slides are for performance. So we work with analytic partners to do a benchmark within technology, financial services, and education to understand our performance relative to our other social and display peers. Like, how does LinkedIn perform? And what they found in their portfolio of advertisers that they measure for is that LinkedIn's 2 to 5 times more effective in technology than other social and display platforms. We're 7 times more effective in financial services at driving incremental funded customer signups and account openings, and we're 2 to 4 times more effective as other display media at driving education outcomes. So not all impressions are created equal. Not all platforms are created equal. There are certain benefits of advertising on a more if you show up on a Hulu, you're going to reach a different audience than if you show up on Pinterest or LinkedIn. And so we wanted to really give marketers a sense of what do you use us for. And we partnered with Nielsen to do a neuroscience lab study of how well did customers or viewers in a lab remember an ad, and what was the sentiment that was changed about the brand. And what they found is that LinkedIn was actually the most resonant platform across the ones that were looked at, and in both B2B and B2C context. So like, what exactly does that mean? Is we were more likely to remember the ad, but also the attitudinal attributes of the brand shifted. So our halo effect, or our ability to kind of transfer positioning prestige was greater than other platforms. So if someone saw an ad on LinkedIn versus our competitors, they were 3 times more likely to view that brand as more professional, 3 times more likely to rate the brand as more intelligent, twice as likely to view it as either higher quality or more respectable. So when you're planning where do you want to speak to your customers, yes, we have this sort of seismic change in how customers are viewing media, but not all media is created equal. Showing up in direct mail is different than in a billboard, than is different in a television ad. And we're saying the same thing here amongst media platforms, is that LinkedIn is driving outsized performance in a number of verticals and driving business outcomes. We're also driving outsized brand performance. So showing up on LinkedIn, having the right tone, creative, and targeting can really drive both brand objectives as well as your business outcomes.
Great. And I think that really interesting stuff about the halo effect. I'm just learning more about that now. And I think, Mike, there was an interesting data point that the ROI genome was showing that the halo effect typically contributes about half of the impact of marketing, but then there were some other factors that, aside from the halo, that influence business impact.
Yeah, marketing's complicated, and so is marketing measurement, which is something that we talk a lot about, and making sure that we're holistic in understanding its performance. So halo is a big one, and so put simply, when we're advertising a particular product or service, or promoting a particular product or service, there's the impact onto that particular product or service, as well as what we call the halo effect onto other portions of the business. So they can be other service lines, it can be other variations of the product. And it's important to make sure that we take those into account. I know that just had a conversation with the clients about how brand lift studies a lot of times don't take those things into account, and they're just looking at the specific advertised form. So it is an important element to make sure that we're considering when we're assessing performance. Just one of the pieces of the puzzle. And then if we take that concept and think about it more broadly, it's also about impacts across time. So the way that advertising and marketing works many times is there's an immediate effect, but a lot of times there's also a delayed effect, making sure that concept is measured. It's something that's oftentimes discounted in some types of analytics, to make sure that today's advertising affecting tomorrow's sales is just as important to make sure we recognize. And so, and then omni-channel, online advertising drives offline sales, offline advertising drives online sales, and making sure that we understand those dynamics and are measuring them properly.
Yeah, and given the current situation, we're obviously seeing a huge shift to online selling and buying. What are the implications of this? And I guess, how can marketers strike the right balance in their omni-channel strategy?
Yeah, so we're obviously that there has been a shift for many years towards more online commerce, and so what we saw recently was obviously the pandemic has increased that pretty substantially. In the grand scheme of things, it's still on the smaller side. I think that's important to note. The U.S. Census Bureau just released a report that said 11% of all retail was online before COVID, and now it's up to 16%. So that's a pretty sizable jump in a very short period of time. But it's still, we need to make sure we take that with a grain of salt and recognize that there is still a lot of in-person and physical retail happening and physical dynamics. So, but the more important thing is the way that this is impacting performance. So we're seeing that marketing continues to perform during this time, as we talked a little bit earlier, but where those impacts are happening is changing. So when we advertise, on TV, a significant portion of the benefit is actually driving people to the website to research products or to consider, alternatives. So that the dynamics are changing in the sense that when we advertise and promote businesses, where the impact is evolving over time. And traditionally, digital activities tend to over-index on digital behaviors, which is consistently true, but they're increasing over time. And so making sure that we understand those dynamics is important.
Okay, great. So last month, Nielsen published a special work from home edition of their total audience report. And as T mentioned earlier, within it, they found that consumers may be working from home, but they're still consuming a lot of content, in particular, streaming video content. So T, I'm super curious to hear more of your learnings there.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is that streaming is now about a quarter of the total TV usage out there, which is a substantial number as of Q2. So very recent information of this year. So that definitely incorporates the COVID-19 effect out there. But again, a lot of these behaviors are here to stay. And it's really important to be able to kind of measure those trends and understand where the world is going, where it is today, but also where it's going next. The other thing is we're not just seeing an increase in streaming minutes, we're seeing an increase in the number of services that audiences and consumers are purchasing out there. What that means is that it's really important to understand this whole behavior across platforms. And Mike mentioned a really important point, which is as TV drives other platforms and behavior outside of kind of more the traditional or streaming media, then you have to really start understanding these, we call them endogenous effects, right? Where the various components of what drives your sales, the advertising that drives your sales are interdependent and dependent on each other, which allows you to, so really understanding this will allow you to map and be a lot more precise with where to invest, where to put your marketing dollars.
Okay, great. So before we shift the conversation to the future, I do want to tackle, the actual title of the broadcast, which is what marketers should be measuring now. So if we could just go around and do a round robin of, given everything that's changed, what are the metrics that are most meaningful to look at now and moving into the next year? And within that, you can talk about short-term versus long-term. And I know there's disparities across, verticals and industries, but just so our audience can get a general sense. Carl, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I have to, on quality metrics. So what we're going to see is, people traditional out of home, and then TV has dramatically changed. Either people aren't going outside or consumers are shifting their media consumption from broadcast media to closed streaming, which often doesn't even offer the ability to target with ads. So you're going to have less opportunities to show up. So it's really important to pay attention to your quality metrics across all the platforms, your ad score, your relevant ad quality ranking on Facebook, your relevant score on LinkedIn. You're getting less chances to show up well. So when you do, if it's not going well, quickly changing and pivoting on those approaches is probably more important than ever. I feel like in old times you would have accounts that would run low scoring ads just because that was getting the CPC or CPM that they were looking for, and ultimately they didn't care. But right now your digital footprint is probably the only tone and only message you're going to be able to get to with your customers. So being really mindful that as you get these early signals from platforms on performance, making sure you're optimizing not necessarily to your CPC and your CTR, but what are the relevance and quality metrics, because those ultimately influence how performance will look like on those platforms from a pricing point of view, but also more importantly, how users are responding in terms of bounce rates and is this relevant for me? You're not going to have another chance by catching them with a billboard or catching them with a TV ad, because everyone's consumption preferences have changed.
Right. Mike, T, anything to add? We can start with you, Mike.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say I think that the question is around favorite or what marketing metrics are important. I would say, just generalizing the business impact. So I'm going to cheat a little bit because I do think it's misleading to just focus on, the direct effects, the click-through rates. Those are parts of the puzzle, but it is important to recognize, and even just ROI. ROI is really hugely valuable to understand. But to be able to understand what's driving the ROI, what's driving business impact. So business impact because we're driving a certain amount of sales, but understanding where it's coming from and what's causing it is important. And that holistic dynamic of the immediate effects that are direct, and then again, those indirect effects that we need to make sure we're including, because if we're only looking at those short-term trackable information, we're missing a significant portion of the role that marketing plays and making conclusions that we might not want to make. So having that full picture is important.
Great.
Yeah. I would just add to this. I would say we see marketers moving from where should I invest to who should I invest in, really thinking about their consumers and their audiences. So getting more granular in terms of the various consumer segments and targets and individuals or household is an extremely important trend in the industry. So the kind of the KPI, the granularity of the KPIs is changing, even if the KPI itself is not. So that's one area where we see this happen more and more. And again, as Mike said, having the kind of the broader holistic understanding of what drives the business and how can I act on it, right? Where do I invest, but also how do I continuously improve? How do I get that extra quarter turn of the dial to be better than my competition, better than the benchmarks in the marketplace?
Yep, I totally agree. We talk a lot on our team about long-term metrics and moving beyond the click-through rate and all that. So that was great. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and shift the conversation to the future. So I'd love to know your predictions about the future of measurement. So the question is, how will things change and evolve within measurement, do you think, within the next 2 to 5 years? So we'll start with you, T.
Yeah, I wish I knew.
You don't know?
Based on what we've seen over the past couple of years or even this year, the world is changing faster than we can all keep up with it. I think it's important for at least professionals in my field and Mike's field, and just professionals in the marketing field in general, to stay on top of the various trends and understand what's actually happening in the marketplace. I would say, again, that shift to individuals, household personalization will continue. And ultimately, we will be getting served ads that are more and more efficient and effective, and ads that we want to be served.
Perfect. And Mike, what's in your crystal ball?
Yeah, there's a lot of things changing in the marketplace, in the marketing world, in the measurement space. I would say one that I believe is going to be playing out more is something that we've kind of alluded to a few times, which is understanding the brand effects and the longer term effects. So in recent years, there's been a lot of focus on, conversion and trying to drive purchase, which is certainly going to continue to be important, but rounding that out with more of a holistic understanding of brands, because that's essentially what's going to lead to long-term success. And so understanding brand effects, long-term impacts, those dynamics, which can be done today and are being done, but just sporadically here and there. I think that's going to be elevated in the field to be able to make better decisions for long-term sustainable growth.
Okay, great. And Carl.
Yeah, I think my answer to this question largely depends on which kind of segment you're in. So we have our small medium business, our mid-market, and our enterprise. And I think in 2 to 5 years, we're going to be way past the, I started my digital marketing career at Google, and there's always a success story of, someone discovered this keyword and it ended up becoming a 10, 30, $100 million a year e-commerce business. I think those days are largely gone. I think the platforms are mature, they're expensive. You're not going to see like this discovery moment for SMB. It'll be more keeping the lights on. For mid-market, there's going to be a huge democratization of MarTech tools and using a lot of the customer segmentation, hyper-targeting personalization that enterprise has long pioneered and made sort of the cornerstay. And I think the enterprise segment is really going to win the next 2 to 5 years, because when you look at the changes to sunsetting cookies and privacy compliance, it's really up to the large companies that are creating direct partnerships with platforms that are coming up with their own sort of back-end measurement ecosystem of collecting the data that is now kind of commonly shared with cookies. I think it's going to be the companies that invest in building up those infrastructure that are really going to carry the day, because they're going to be able to drive that personalized message and really effective targeted marketing in a way that isn't going to be possible in 2 to 3 years once we see the changes from Apple and Google roll out around cookies. So I think pick your segment, and that's my advice to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, just wanted to hammer on the point that I think research says that 77% of marketers are measuring within the first 6 months of the campaign, even though the average buying cycle now extends way past 6 months. So a shout out to my colleague Sean Callahan, who manages the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog. His quote is, "The reality is most marketers are showing up to their book club having only read a sixth of the book." And I thought that was pretty relevant. So hopefully you can take that with you as well. All right, so we have time for questions. So let me take a look at the stream. I know I've been gathering some as we've been going along. All right, here is one. How do you convince CEOs and CFOs who are focused on immediate numbers to continue with advertising spend? And feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think that it's all about building relationships and communicating the information properly. And I think this is part of what's made our company successful. Is the technology is important, and having MarTech serve up the information, but being able to explain things and talk through the dynamics is important. And showcasing the impact in the short term, and then leading indicators of short-term metrics that are representative of longer-term dynamics, because it is they're going to benefit by understanding, making the right decision, and highlighting that for the C-level folks.
I think understanding the scale and the importance of what marketing brings to the table, not just in terms of immediate return, but also long-term return, and then just the importance of marketing around having the right position in the right marketplace and gaining that competitive advantage. That's something that CEOs and CMOs and CFOs especially respond to quite a bit.
I think it's you can't just respond with here's the impressions I serve, these are the people I've reached, the traditional like reach and frequency and just scale metrics that marketing is known for sharing. You really have to speak the language of the growth plans of the business and translate your marketing tactics to that. So how does your CEO and CFO plan to improve margin? What segments are they growing into or declining? How have you translated the business goals to your marketing plan? And then how are you translating through the right attribution and tooling those channels that you've chosen to activate on your marketing plan to that strategy? How are you tracking mind share and what's the cost per mind share? How are you tracking sales and what's the payback period for each given platform? And then you have to really rely on the third-party ecosystem or more sophisticated tools for measurement. If you're living in GA or you're living in Omniture, you're not seeing the full value of what you're doing in marketing. You really need to have a comprehensive media mix model, commercial mix model approach to see here's how all of the things that you're doing impact business numbers. If you're relying on web analytics tracking, you're relying on short-term KPIs and not business growth. And so making sure that you understand the business, have translated what you're doing to that language, and then consistently monitor it on both short-term and long-term time horizons to make sure what you're doing is moving the numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was helpful for me. I hope that was helpful for the person who asked the question. Quite a bit of questions around how everyone has moved to almost exclusively virtual events. So what's your opinion on the increase in the number of events happening virtually, in parentheses, conferences, meetups, webinars, and what would be the best metric to measure their effectiveness?
Yeah, I can address that. So I think with respect to the events, it all comes down to the availability of the data around it. So whether it's virtual or in-person events, the kind of the frequency or the occurrence of these events or the scale, the attendance of these events, those are some of the factors we look at. Now, the nice thing about the virtual events is there's probably fewer parameters to deal with in a way, right? There's, when you're talking about interpersonal relationships and in-person relationships, then there's a lot of factors that are, much more difficult to measure. So that's made things a little bit easier, but has definitely reduced the effectiveness of these types of interactions.
Yeah, we work with some B2B businesses, and this topic obviously is a very hot one. Many have invested for many years in large in-person events that have been very successful. They are very costly though, so there's some benefits to these online webinars and other ways to reach customers. It really comes back to understanding what's the value of, we talked about the value of an impression, same concept, the value of an event. Understand the reach, understand the impact, and the impacts are going to be different, but that doesn't mean that they're worse necessarily, because there are different ways for us to activate online that are easier for us to implement. It's just about finding the right balance of how do we shift from in-person to online.
Yeah, and I think, it's obviously really difficult to recreate the magic of an in-person event. You can't replace that. But I do think that what we mentioned, the accessibility piece is huge. You can reach a lot more people, and then the budget piece is also huge, I think, as well. It's a lot. Events are super expensive, as Mike mentioned. So it's a lot. You can save money, put that saved budget towards something else. All right, so we probably have time for one more question. Okay, so what are the most important marketing skills now, and what's hot in 2021? So I guess this is more of like someone who's looking to brush up on their B2B marketing skills. And you can also frame the question as like what you look for when you're hiring a B2B marketer too.
Well, in our space, again, I'm biased, right? So data scientists and people who are basically can sort through vast amounts of data, but they can really translate, right? We need translators of the vast amounts of data to real business impact and business conversations. So I would call it's a translator skill that everybody's looking for. So folks that can really kind of cross the bridge from understanding the science to truly understanding the business impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a skill set that is in high demand now and will only grow because there are a lot of experts in data science, but that don't understand business context and don't understand how decisions are made, don't understand and just the way that what they've learned. And it's really about integrating a lot of these things together and having all the pieces of the puzzle. And that's true even in our space with data preparation, analytics, and insights and delivering to C-level audience.
Great, Carl.
And I would say the comparison is that marketers who think of data science as the data science function versus marketers who think of data fluency as part of their role. I think you need to be able to pull basic SQL queries. You need to be able to read and understand API specs, create rapid prototype dashboards. A lot of I would say marketers would put them that they can understand the output, but they don't know the input or the process to get there. And not knowing those basic tools is like not knowing Excel 10 or 15 years ago. I don't expect someone to come up with custom machine learning models or be able to upgrade an enterprise data warehouse strategy, but you should be able to put together your own Domo or Tableau dashboard without having to rely on another function to pull it together. And the skill sets and tools are available to learn those things, whether it's Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, or even just quickly Googling answers. And marketers who step up to the new data tools and view that as their domain and not just the other more technical role.
All right, great. Thank you for that. I hope that was helpful to everyone who asked those questions. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our audience for tuning in and being so engaged throughout the broadcast. We hope you learned something today and that you're feeling armed with more knowledge about measuring ROI in today's marketing landscape. And of course, thank you to our guests, Mike, T, and Carl, for being here and for an insightful conversation. It's been an absolute honor to get to moderate this conversation with thought leaders such as yourselves. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Last thing I'll note is that our next Live with Marketers airs October 20th, and we'll cover new research we conducted in partnership with Edelman, which follows B2B marketing thought leadership, assessing how executives are responding to the pandemic and what that means for strategic decision making. So until next time, take care, everyone.